This is Bring to Front, a podcast about design work and life by the Toronto Design Directory. I'm your host, Margot Trudell, and today I'm speaking with Fidel Peña, creative director and partner at Underline Studio here in Toronto. With roots in El Salvador and design experience from the UK, he brings his wealth of talent and knowledge to his studio's many branding and arts projects. We'll be talking about running a design business, being part of a community, and his series of political posters. Let's go say hi. Hey, how are you?
Good. How are you? Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thanks for joining me. I think this is going to be a really great conversation. Really looking forward to learning more all about everything that you do. I've been a huge fan of Underline for many, many years. Your work is gorgeous, and I think everybody knows that, given all the awards that you guys have won over the years.
Thank you.
And then also just your story up until now. I think it's been a very interesting story, and you've definitely accomplished a lot. So I'm looking forward to learning more about all of that.
Sounds good.
Let's start from the beginning. So I'd love to learn a little bit more about your background. I know you're originally from El Salvador, and then you moved to Canada with your family when you were, I believe, a teenager. And then it was after that you studied design and then started working design. So would you mind giving us kind of just an overview of that part of your life?
Like you said, I was born in El Salvador. I lived there until I was 17. That's when my family moved here. We moved here because of the Civil War at the time, so we had to get out of the country. So obviously that marked a lot of my early forming as a person. I lived a very comfortable life there. I won't lie and say that it was a tragic life. It was a comfortable life, but there was a war going on. So that shapes you, obviously. And when we came here, it was, I traveled to the States a lot before. I have a family there. So the culture shock wasn't as massive as it could have been, but it was still, I felt it, but I count myself very lucky because it was here that I found graphic design as a career. By chance, I ran across an issue of Applied Arts magazine, and up to that point, I really didn't know what I wanted to do. But when I saw that, I thought, okay, this looks like a lot of fun, and people get paid to do it, and that's it. I want to do this. And obviously, my mom is an engineer, and she was totally opposed to the whole idea, and she didn't talk to me for months because I had made that decision. But I went ahead and did it, and obviously, I'm glad I did it. It was definitely the only thing I thought I could do for a living once I found out. And when you start first, when you at school, at college, I felt like the influence of being Salvadorian shaped me. But I went to school to George Brown College, or a lot of people from many places, so it didn't really feel like I needed to speak about it that much. It wasn't until later that it became an important part of who I am as a designer. During that time, early part of my career, I was more focused on just learning the craft of design. That's what I wanted to do. I was obsessed with that. I was obsessed with learning how to be a good designer. That's all I wanted to do.
And then so you studied at George Brown, and then was concrete your first job out of school?
No. So my first job out of school, I graduated a long time ago. So I'm so old. In the 90s, mid-90s, let's just say that. And, I went to George Brown because I had already done a college diploma. I didn't want to spend that long much in college. And I noticed that some of the people that I liked their work a lot had gone to George Brown. So Bill Douglas had gone to George Brown. I thought, if Bill Douglas went to George Brown, I think I can go there and be a good designer too. Anyway, I couldn't get a job right out of school. And one of my teachers hooked me up with a friend of his who was hiring. It was called, at the time, Technion Global. It was a furniture company. So that was my first job out of school. It was an in-house job at a furniture company. I mean, I met some really wonderful people there. My boss at the time, his name is Mark Campbell. He's still there, I think. And I met some great industrial designers. It was a good experience from a personal level, but obviously the work wasn't that exciting. So a couple of years into it, I realized, okay, I really need to make a move and do something. And that's when I applied to a few studios and got the job at Concrete.
Okay, yeah. I couldn't really believe, I guess I knew that concrete's been around a long time, but I couldn't really believe it's been around so long that it was established at the point where you were just starting your career.
So when in the 90s, they were the hottest studio in the city. I mean, they're still doing amazing work, but at the time, it really was like, wow, they were doing incredible work, project after project. So yeah, I was thrilled when I got that job.
Yeah, it must have been so exciting to be hired there, like not quite right out of school, but second job, but still pretty impressive.
Yeah, and it was a funny story because I sent my promo to John and Didi and I didn't hear back for months. So I had given up on Didi, and I remember this was in the 90s where email wasn't as popular. So I think Didi called and said, we're looking for a designer. Would you come for an interview? Obviously, I went right away. And I think she called me back the next day offering me the job. And I just couldn't believe it, how I had waited 4 months without hearing. And in 2 days, I pretty much had a job offer from them. So it was very, very exciting. Yeah. And it's something I talked to, I don't know if it's part of the conversation, but it's something I talk to a lot of young designers, the idea of doing promos of some sort and standing out in a different way when you're applying for jobs. I mean, I'm sure in the 90s, it was less emails and PDFs. It was more letters and resumes and sending, but I knew that if I just send that, I would get lost in the pile. So the promo I had crafted for concrete, which if I looked at it now, I would think it's pretty ugly, but at the time I thought it was nice. I had put a lot of work into it. It was handmade. It was a lot of pages. I mean, if anything, I thought John and Didi at least thought, okay, this guy really wants this job. Like this guy really likes us. And so I think that obviously helped a lot in my chance of getting a job there.
Do you think printed promos like that are still useful today?
I think so. I think they really stand out, and they make a difference. Yeah. I mean, it's harder. I mean, people, and I guess it depends to who you're sending it to. Us, it makes a difference. Maybe, obviously, if you're sending it to a digital agency, they wouldn't even look at it. But it depends on who. And if studios like us, I think really makes a difference, where we're still doing some print work, branding work, and so on. I do think it makes a difference, yes.
Do you get a lot of that kind of thing at Underline?
We get a lot of PDFs, not a lot of printed promos.
Yeah, I feel like I graduated from OCAD in 2011, and I feel like I was starting my career right as we transitioned from having a printed portfolio to everything being digital. Because I had a printed portfolio for the first couple of years that I was interviewing, looking for jobs, that kind of thing. But I really feel like I was just on the cusp of when that was kind of the norm.
Not when I graduated. Everything was this big books that you had to flip through and talk about the projects. So I was at Concrete for over 2 years, maybe about 2.5 years. And then my wife now, my girlfriend at the time, we were dating, and she wanted to go live in the UK. And I said, I love my job here. I don't really want to move. But if, I got a great job, I would consider moving. So we went for a holiday, but I did some interviews in that holiday. And the job I really wanted was at Pentagram because specifically of the creative director at the time, the Spanish creative director called Fernando Gutierrez. I wanted to work for him. Obviously, Pentagram was huge, but I wanted to work for him because I wanted to work in Spanish. So I did a bunch of interviews, and then he's the only one I heard back from, but he offered me a job, and I said, okay, I'll go because this is a great opportunity. So I worked there not that long. It was a bit less than a year. It was intense. It was crazy hours, intense work, very chaotic. His team, I'm pretty sure still that way. A Pentagram is teams, so you work with your team. And it was very chaotic, crazy, but I learned almost everything I think I know about design in that time there. It was a very intense experience. I became very good friends with the designers I worked with at the time there, who founded Mucho in Barcelona. Pablo Juncadella and Marc Català were the two designers that were at the time that became two of the original founders of Mucho. So it was a really wonderful experience. And then my second year in the UK, I freelanced. I did work at different studios. I wanted to enjoy the time being there. I didn't want to work 9 to midnight every day. I didn't want to just be in an office. So it was a great experience. It was definitely great. And I do think it helped my work more than anything else I've done in my career, for sure. It was very rigorous, It was very rigorous type. He had been trained at the London College of Printing, Fernando, and he had worked at a studio called CDT. That was a very well-known studio in the 80s in the UK. So his style of working was extremely rigorous. I was trained a lot at Concrete, and I thought I knew a lot about detailing and things. But when I worked for him, I realized it was a different level altogether of viewing the details of design. And yeah, it was insane.
I was wondering about that, especially given that this is a European studio as well. And I know, or at least it appears that in Europe, they have a different conceptual approach, I think, to design than we do in North America. Was it at all like a culture shock kind of in a way going to a European studio versus North America? Or was it just like, this is far and away the better way to work and everything?
It was a culture shock. It's a culture shock because it was like British/Spanish. There was a lot of yelling, a lot of screaming, a lot of commotion in the team. Definitely was a culture shock. but to me, it was just like, oh my God, my work is getting so much better so quickly. That was what I felt. Like by doing what they were telling me to do, I could feel my work was getting better. And of course, it felt like it was a lot more work. It was like going to a boot camp of training, like you're exhausted, you're beat up, but then you realize, okay, this is working. Like it's crazy. Like, yeah, I wouldn't want to work ever like that again, but it was like boot camp. Like it was like crazy. Like, and it was just the detailing, the way they work, the way they compose their grids, the way they view everything. It was just like there was a history behind the way they were doing everything, right? And yeah, it was really nice. It was really nice experience. Yeah, looking back on it, it was an experience. It was, when I was in the middle of it, I was drowning in it, but yeah.
That sounds intense. It sounds like the kind of experience you can really only handle when you are like 20, 21, and you have that energy.
Absolutely, I would not be able to handle it right now. Yes, no.
I'm exhausted just listening to you talk about it. But it must have been thrilling working at a studio with such talented designers, being surrounded by people who are like passionate about the work and people who are taking it so seriously. That sounds like thrilling, really.
And what was the most thrilling part? Thinking back, I still feel excited thinking and talking about it. The most exciting thing for me was the atmosphere in the city in London, the amount of amazing designer studios surrounding us. So you were working at Pentagon, you were doing amazing work, but you could see other studios doing incredible work too. At the time, it was Vince Frost, Farrow, um, Johnson Banks. These were the studios that were doing amazing work. But it wasn't 5, it wasn't 10, it was like 30, 40 studios doing incredible work. And there were a lot of incredible magazines and publications publishing that work. To me, that was the amazing thing. And and we were at Pentagon working hard, and we were looking at all that other work, and it would just motivate you to do better. Like you would look at it and go, oh no, this is good, but it's not good enough, because you knew people were doing better work out there. So that was amazing. I came back so full of energy after those 2 years, because I came back so like energized from that. It was a very healthy competition, with everybody, and everybody respected each other's work. Everybody was amazed at each other's work, but everybody was trying to do what everybody else was doing. So it was that was my favorite part of the experience. Yeah, for sure.
That sounds amazing. Yeah, having that again support kind of from your peers, and that inspiration from each other, and like it's not competition. You're not necessarily, maybe a little bit jealous,
Hmm.
but you're not trying to beat each other out and like be the better designer. You are just kind of adding on top of what everybody else brings and learning from it. That
Hmm.
sounds like a rare experience too.
Yeah, and the thing was too that it didn't feel like no one was talking about billings, no one was talking about clients. Everybody was talking about the quality work. It felt like everybody. I'm sure, we were young designers, so maybe the creative directors and the owners were talking about those things when they met. But as studios and as what we felt, we weren't talking about size of clients or billings or size of studios. Farah had 4 designers, and they were doing some of the best work. No one cared about that. Everybody just cared about the quality work. That's what it felt like to me. And that, to me, in Toronto, at least in the 90s, it was about studios talking about their size of their accounts and their billings. And like, it just didn't feel like people here cared about the quality of work. And when I went to London, except for Concrete and a handful of studios, maybe, but a lot of the studios seem to care so much about money and not about work. And then bit over there, it just felt like everybody cared about the work, and that's it. So that was an amazing thing. Yeah.
Yeah, that's really interesting. That's a big difference. I can see how that would make a massive impact on the quality of work coming out of there. So then everything that you kind of learned and observed from your time at Pentagram, I realize this was quite a while ago now, but have you been able to take any of that and kind of apply that to Underline?
Absolutely. We applied a lot of that to Underline. Um, when I came back, I worked at Dinnican House. That was a studio that was, I don't know if you know it, but they were doing amazing work in the 90s and early 2000s. Um, and so I came back and worked for them, and I had a really nice experience there, but I felt like I wanted to apply the things I had learned in London here, and I couldn't quite do it there. So um, casually talking to Claire, we talked about the idea. Like, we had never talked about it before, about doing a studio together, but casually talking on that time after I had come back about doing a studio, we talked about doing it together, and we thought, she had been at Concrete for over 8 years at the time. She was a creative director at the time, and then I think she was just getting a little bored of being there. I'm not exactly sure. She can speak about it to it herself, but it just felt like we had similar ideas, that we wanted to do work that was more European, that had a different feeling that was being done in the city at the time. We had very similar ideas about design, and we've always had very similar taste. Yeah, we have very similar way of seeing design. So it just felt like we wanted to apply that, and no one else was doing it in the city, and it was a good idea to do a business together. So applying a lot of what I had learned at Pentagram, but applying that, that mentality of doing clean air, but I guess I don't know how to describe it. More, yeah, Swiss based, but more minimalist, more European design, and we wanted to do it, and so it felt like the right time to do it.
Yeah, and I think looking at Underline's work now, I think that's how I would describe it. Definitely, it feels a little bit more European, even today versus the work you would have been doing at Pentagram in the '90s. And it's very modern. And I think that's something that makes, or one of the reasons why Underline stands out so much in the Toronto and even North American kind of design ecosystem. It has that very unique kind of style that at this point I recognize as Underline style, but yeah, it's very informed by European design.
Which is kind of ironic because neither Claire or I are European. I'm from Latin America. She's very Canadian, even though her family obviously is British and she has roots there and been influenced by it. But we're not from there, but we are very influenced by that, the aesthetics of it, right? So
It's great that you were able to bring that back here. I think the being a designer in North America versus Europe, those feel very different. I mean, because they are, and it feels like you kind of can't import the European way of working or a mentality or something to North America. But you guys have done it successfully, basically. And your experience in Europe is now like, what, 25 years ago, something like that. But you've still maintained that despite being a North American designer for so long.
yeah. I wonder. I don't know. Maybe it's because the European quality of it is more about stripping to the essentials, caring about the aesthetics and the content, which when you think about it that way, it's not so much that it's European, it's more that it's stripped from superficiality in a commercial way. And in that sense, I guess it can be considered also Latin American, because Latin America is a chaotic region of the world, but there's also that, a passion for the work, a passion for the essence of the work. When like I look at Porto Roca's work, I think their work is incredible. And if you know the New York-based Brazilian design studio, and they seem to have a similar sensibility of stripping the work to the essentials because of the content and sometimes an element of surprise. I remember when we first started Underline, a few designer friends would tell us, well, what's nice about Underline is that you guys are doing that kind of work, but you still bring an element of surprise sometimes. You twist it sometimes, like you don't just let it be so minimalist and clean that it gets boring. And we wouldn't want it to be that either. We want some surprise in there, some joy in the work as well, bringing some joy in it too.
You're right. I think a lot of North American design and advertising too has a lot of flash in it, a lot of cool something or other, cool imagery, icons, graphics, whatever. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, but it does feel like a little bit of an overcompensation in some ways.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. Yes, yeah.
So you were in London for a couple years, and you came back to Canada, and you knew Claire from Concrete. That's how you guys met, right?
Yeah.
And then you decided to open up the studio. What were those early days running Underline like? I imagine that was pretty stressful.
It was crazy. It was almost as crazy as the time of Pentagram. It was really intense. I kept feeling guilty because Claire had left a really good job to do this. And we were not making any money. We were working insane hours. Luckily, we had a couple of clients, but they were very low-paying clients. It was more for the quality of work. Prefix Photo was Claire's client from before that she had done freelance for a while. And obviously, we were doing fun and interesting work for Prefix, but it wasn't paying anything almost. We were designing some books. At that time, we designed a book for Susurly. Again, wonderful project, but very little money. We did, I think, one branding project the first year. And so we were barely scraping by, working insane hours. We started in the spare bedroom of my condo. Then we moved to 401 Richmond to a tiny little hall that didn't have a sink. It was crazy. But we were so into the work at the same time. We were so into doing great work. We were loving that so much, but there was a point after like a while, maybe a year or two, that we said, okay, we need to start making some money. We both have our spouses that had jobs, and that had allowed us to kind of be able to survive. But we had to make some changes to the way we were running the studio so we could make it sustainable, that we couldn't keep going like that. So we purposely started to get some clients that could pay some real money for proper jobs, and then we were able to hire our first employee, who was Clea, who worked with us for about 8 or 9 years. She was our first employee, and it was having an employee felt like we felt so grown up. Okay, we have a designer working with us, and now we felt like a real studio at that point.
Yeah, and then I mean, a lot of your clients, at least today, are very, I'd say, arts oriented. But was that true at the beginning, or did you just kind of take whoever would come to you?
Well, because of Prefix and that book we were doing, a lot of our initial clients were art-oriented, which was great because it was interesting work, but they really especially because a lot of them were smaller galleries at the point, because we were kind of like freelancers. They weren't big art clients, so their budgets were so incredibly small. So we were doing one of our first clients was Intraxis, was an electronic media arts gallery. And the work we were doing for them was a lot of fun. We were doing a brochure for each exhibition. I think it was every 2 months that opened up. We did first the branding, then we did this exhibitions, brochures, and we could do whatever we wanted pretty much. And so we were doing these experimental posters that became brochures, but we weren't getting paid. We couldn't even pay, I think, the electricity bill. We were getting paid for those jobs, right? So it wasn't purposeful. It kind of became part of our portfolio. We had to make an effort to get clients outside of the arts to be able to pay the bills. That's what we had to work really hard at, to start trying to get some, we call them, corporate clients, so that we could pay the bills. And I think one of our first corporate clients was Dyson, which the vacuum people, which ironically came through this London studio that I had never met in person. Cartledge Levine did their work for Dyson. And so the person in London needed someone in Toronto to do the work, and she asked them, and somehow they knew our work and they recommended us, and that's how we got that account.
Dyson's a pretty great account.
It was, we were doing the Canadian work, so it wasn't huge jobs. There were big jobs, and there were like booths for exhibits and some brochures and things like that, but it doesn't matter. It was like, finally we felt like we had a proper paying client that paid bills.
Do you think that over here in North America, in order to do the kind of work that you do, the style of work that you do, you have to work for arts clients? Because it feels like they're the most open-minded over here as far as creative goes.
Mostly, not entirely, but mostly. Yeah, I would think that to do interesting work, you will, if you're lucky, you'll find other clients in other sectors that will let you do it. But most likely, the arts is where you're gonna find the majority of those opportunities for sure. Yeah, but not always. We've had some arts clients who have been more corporate than the boardroom clients. But for the most part, we've had wonderful, wonderful clients in the arts who are intelligent, they have a great eye, they want challenging projects. And then we can count a handful of corporate clients that we've also been able to do that for. But yeah, in the ratio, we've had way more art clients in the arts that have led us to that kind of work, for sure.
It seems like, I think a lot of designers want that kind of creative freedom and to do something really beautiful and conceptual. And arts clients are really the only kind of client that will accept that sort of work, with like a few exceptions, but for the most part. And then they're also not the ones that pay the most. So you end up in that situation like you guys are in, where you have your arts clients that do the beautiful work and you're satisfied creatively, but then you need the corporate client to pay the bills.
And I understand why. The arts, they're trying to challenge their audiences. They're trying to seem different in so many ways. So it makes sense. In the corporate world, I mean, it shouldn't be like that, but they're less willing to take risks. They have someone that they're speaking towards, like they have someone that they have to account for, which in the arts is less likely to happen, right? So, but again, I did find in London that corporate clients were willing to take way more risks.
Yeah. Why do you think that difference is? Is that just a cultural difference between Europe and North America?
I think so. I think it's a cultural difference, because I found in the UK, I don't know how it is now, but back when I lived there, that the general population had a higher level of education culturally and aesthetically. So, and I think it has to do with the surroundings, right? The city's so beautiful. They've had a history of the arts for years that we know about, centuries of it, like in architecture, but in the decorative arts. They have museums dedicated to the decorative arts. So your average person on the street has a much higher level of understanding of design. They've seen William Morris, they've gone to the DNA Museum, they go for free to the Tate. They're way more exposed to great work. So then they become marketing executives, but they've had all that baggage and all that learning in their life just from being around all that wonderful, exposure. So then when they're exposed to good design, they understand it, I think. Here, I don't think that the cultural level of education is the same. So when people who are not involved in the arts face good work, I think they feel threatened. They don't know how to understand it. And then they have to, because they feel a little threatened and insecure, they start having to input in it and add of themselves to it, because that's the only way they can feel that they can control it, because they don't know how to understand it and control it, right? So then I think that's the level. Over there, they're sure of themselves. They know, okay, that's good work, that's not good work. I've seen great work out there, and they can take it. Over here, they're confused. And if they see good work, they're like, oh, yeah, but maybe if you add, and you fill that white space, then you'll be good. But they don't understand that it is good without filling the white space, and that's what makes it good.
Yeah, I had a hunch that was the case, that we're just not educated in the arts as much here when you're growing up in a place like Canada. And then, yeah, once you get into the position as an adult of accepting the creative work from the agency or what have you, you don't really know how to interpret it and understand it. And it's the kind of feeling that I get when I've been in those positions myself, presenting work to clients, is just there's an underlying feeling of anxiety of just, yeah, I don't know how to interpret this, how to understand it. I want to, hear what the design studio or what have you is saying, and I trust these people, but I don't have an underpinning of knowledge strong enough to know that what they're saying is kind of correct, or to really have that true faith in their understanding of the arts. And therefore you get these projects where they're like, yeah, let's fill the white space, let's make the logo bigger, whatever.
And then because they're a bit insecure, once anyone challenges it, they fall apart. Because we have clients say, that's wonderful, I love it. But then someone asks them a question about it, and then the whole thing falls apart. They don't know how to defend the work. They don't know how to feel sure of themselves in it. And then the changes start, and then the whole thing falls apart. Because then we all know it becomes designed by committee. Because they might be the CEO or the CMO, but then they show it to the VP of Finance. The VP of Finance has an opinion and a question. They don't know how to answer it. And all of a sudden we have to make the changes that the VP of Finance suggested. And then the whole thing falls apart. It's not good work anymore.
Yeah, I mean, this is such a common frustration, I think, amongst all designers here. And I think a lot of people have these conversations about, like, how can we, the working designers, change this? But I don't think we can. I think it kind of has to come down to a cultural shift and maybe a policy change or something to that effect, where we teach art at a younger age more in this country, and then it'll trickle up to these interactions. But I don't think designers themselves can necessarily change that, right?
No, we can't change it on our own. Like you said, it's a societal change. And it's not just policies. I think it has to be, like, I'm looking at my window. I have like a storage unit in front of our studio. That's a horrible building. The horrible buildings are everywhere in the world, but we have an appreciation for, as a society, for those things. We're too utilitarian here, I think. It's all about, and I think it has to be a societal shift in that we can't just be utilitarian about everything sometimes. And you see it in the business world here. Sometimes it's so much about what works quick, but not about, and what's the most efficient or what's the most profitable. But it can't always be about that. We need to make sure that sometimes it's not profitable, but it's pleasant, or it gives you joy. Those things are as important, and how to create that change, I think, is a deeper change in that sense. And, every society is flawed. Obviously in the UK and Europe, there's also a lot of that, and a lot of like architecture, but because of their history of being able to maintain a certain level, I think they're able to fight it more. I went on holidays to Copenhagen last year. Wow, that's a beautiful city, and then a beautiful city full of beautiful design in many ways. And how can you not be inspired walking around that? How can you not be working beautiful work just looking at that, right? It moves you, right?
Yeah, and it's very true. My small experiences in Europe I felt the same way. Um, Yeah, it's maybe a little bit disappointing for any designers listening to know that, you and the individual designers can't change this. But I think knowing where it stems from is helpful.
I guess what we can do at least is add a bit of that. We can try to add to it. We can try to add to that with our work. We can try to add with our attitude. We can't be negative about it. We have to stay positive. I mean, and we have to just try to add as much as we can. There are modern cities that have been able to add that feeling of appreciation for design, like New York or other American cities. They're not perhaps the most beautiful cities compared to some other cities, but they have added that energy of good design. So we can do that. Um, Mexico City is another super exciting city. They have beautiful pockets of beautiful architecture, but the city itself is full of energy and full of wonderful energy for design and not just design, for literature and the arts. And they respect and admire their history of art and their history of everything. So I think we can try to add to that. I don't think we can totally give up. I think we have to keep trying to add that. It's at least what we can do.
So we just got to the point in the story where you and Claire have started Underline. You're starting to figure things out. You're starting to get the bills paid. Um, Something that I wanted to ask you, you mentioned hiring your first employee. Your design style at Underline has been pretty consistent over the last, gosh, what is it, 20 years that you've been running the studio?
We've been 19 years now, yes. 20 years next year, yes.
Almost 20. Yeah, wow. So your design style's been fairly consistent. And like I said, it's very inspired by European design. And you've had a number of employees throughout your time. How do you hire people who help you maintain this style? Do you look for designers that already design kind of the way that you guys do? Or is this something you train people in? Or is this just the effect of your creative direction?
I think it's a bit of both. I think we designers who want to work with us like the style of work, obviously. So they want to do this type of work. Early on, I remember there was one designer that we hired for a contract job, and his style was radically different than our style of work, and it was a clash. We couldn't get him to do what we wanted him to do, and he didn't want to do it. He liked our work, but he just didn't want to do this kind of work. And he's a wonderful designer. I don't know what he's doing now, but he went to work in the UK and did amazing work after. But it was just not the style of work we do, and we learned from that experience that we need to hire people who love the work that we do and that want to do it. We can't fight it. There's no way to fight it. So I think it's a natural thing that people that have worked with us have been people who like this type of work, that want to do this type of work. So we do train them a bit when they come in, especially if they just out of school, to do the type of work the way we do. And we have a very specific style of work. So obviously we're not going to let anything out of the studio that we don't like. So, we are direct. We work closely with the designers. And then anything that we present to clients, Claire and I, we both look at it and we both say yes to present to the client. So I guess that style goes through in that way. And then, yeah, but I think it's a natural, like, mutual thing. They wanted this type of work. We want them to do this type of work, and it works well that way. I think our second designer we hired was Emily too. And, her work was beautiful. And already she went to York. Her work was very beautiful, but she had an aesthetic that was similar to Underlines at the time, and she wanted to do this type of work. So it was a natural extension for her to work, I think, with us. And she went to work for Gilbert Lee for a while, like it was, and then she started Tongue. They did beautiful work when they were doing that. So yeah, there was this. We admire the work that of the people who work for us and with us too. We think they do beautiful work. They think we do. I hope they think we do beautiful work. So it kind of works in a nice way like that. Yes, yes.
Yeah, it's interesting and seems maybe a little bit lucky that you've been able to find so many people over the years that do or work in your kind of style in that area. I would think that'd be harder to find.
Yeah, I think it's surprising. I think a lot of people in the city like this type of work. I think it's more frustrating for designers because I think they wish there were more studios doing our type of work. There are a few, but not a lot. So a lot of designers who like this type of work, I think there are a lot of designers who like this type of work. When I do it, they have to leave the city, because I've had conversations with young designers like that. They say, "We like to work for you, and I'm sorry, we're not hiring. We're small. We don't hire that often." And they look for other studios that do our type of work, and they can find it. So they leave the city. They go somewhere else, to try to find that, because we don't have enough studios here, I think, for the amount of great designers that are in the city.
Yeah, I imagine that I mean, I see some new studios opening up, mostly small affairs, kind of like Underline, and it's usually like one or two people behind. And I mean, growing a business it's a whole other, that could be a whole other podcast.
Yes, yes.
Uh,
A more depressing podcast.
like it's hard, right? And I
Yes,
mean,
yes.
even you talking about the struggles and wanting to do this more arts oriented work with this kind of European style and everything, and then yet again you have to get these corporate clients to pay the bills. I mean, I think that's the reality that most design businesses faced, is just you ultimately at the end of the day you have to do what your client is paying you to do. And if they're insisting on some kind of flashy, ugly, whatever, there's a point where you kind of have to just stop pushing back and forth, and you just kind of have to do it. And I think that's where most people get a little bit stuck, because yeah, ultimately you do kind of need to be paid at the end of the day. And it seems very rare, and yeah, kind of lucky for a business to be able to establish themselves as this more arts oriented thing and have success, get lots of clients in and helping them pay the bills and that kind of thing. It's very difficult.
It is. It is. It's a lot of ups and downs too. It's a lot of ups and downs. Sometimes things are going really smoothly. You find a lot of clients that like your work, and you have a nice balance of high paying and low paying clients, but you're satisfied. And then all of a sudden there's lows where you're not finding those people, or they're not finding you, and you're like, okay, what's going on? Is this the end? Is this it? And then all of a sudden it works out again, but a lot of ups and downs.
Would it be, do you think, from a business perspective, easier? Because a lot of your clients are Canadian and you have some American clients too. But would it be easier to continue doing design in this style that you want to work in if you were able to take on European clients from Toronto?
Yeah, I think so. I think it would be easier. Speaking with friends that have studios in Europe, anywhere in Spain or the Netherlands, I think so. But then first of all, time difference, and second, competing with them, it would make no sense. But if we kind of have more clients like that here, it would make life easier, for sure, for sure. And it would make our life easier, not just for us, but for many other studios, because I know of other studios that feel the same way.
Yeah, that sounds frustrating. That's why I don't run a design studio.
Yes, it is. It is. It is. It's crazy. It's crazy. Because then you think, okay, what happened? Where are the clients that understand this sometimes? And luckily, they come around. They appear from a corner that you didn't think they would. But sometimes it feels like there's no one left, and you're like, what happened?
Do you find, because I think we're in an era now of a lot more entrepreneurship, and a lot of people are starting their own independent small businesses, and some of those become very successful and they grow. Do you find there are more businesses and more small clients in that way available today than in the past?
No, I feel like it's about the same. There might be more, but many of those very small businesses don't have the budgets to hire a studio, so we're not feeling. Usually, the small businesses that come to us they have some investment already and they have some budget. But really, really small studios normally don't come to us unless they're in the arts or they're in a non-for-profit that they think we might take them on. So we're not finding that there are more than there were before, really. Another thing to mention too is that being in Canada, we're sort of a satellite. We're not in New York. We're not in London. So a lot of the headquarters of the big companies are hiring agencies or studios in New York and London. Or other big cities, but when they come to us, it's more like the Canadian office needs work, but it's not the main projects. It's not the main brand, and it's like, so that's another challenge that we have in Canada too, that we are not speaking directly to the head office for many of those companies. So, like the Dyson example I gave you, we weren't doing the main work because that was being done in London. We were doing the Canadian output. And so you can do some interesting work, but you're not doing the work that you see New York or London studios do, because they're doing it directly with the big companies, right?
So I did want to ask you, early on in the first few years of Underline, you talked about all the challenges of running this business and everything. And then I believe you and Claire both started your families around this time. And I wanted to ask you a little bit about the experience of being a new parent or running a relatively new business. Because I know of a number of parents who are in this exact same position, and it's very difficult. And I'd just love to learn a little bit about how you navigated that, especially now that you have like some perspective on it.
Yeah, so it was funny because Claire and I were doing things mirror like. So she got married and I got married 3 weeks later, And then she had her first kid, and I had my first kid almost immediately. Like we were doing things mirror like in our lives at the time, which obviously it was convenient, and it was very very good that it happened that way because we understood what we were both going through. Her experience, and she would speak more to it herself, is entirely different. She's a mother, and she couldn't take the whole maternity leave, so her experience is very different to mine. I had the huge advantage that my wife could take maternity leave because of her job. So she was home and I took some time off too. Um, so I had it easier than she did. But even then, it was not easy. So I can only imagine what her personal experience was like because it was not easy. So we started Underline 2005, and my son was born 2008, my older son. So 3 years we had of pure dedication to Underline work. The time I talked about before, where we're working crazy hours trying to get some paying clients and make the studio work, and we hire people. Um, Claire's daughter was born, her eldest daughter was born 2 months before my son. So when my son was born, she was away. She took 3 months off. So it was insane, like it was crazy. We both had newborns. We both had a business that was starting out. It was insane. And the interesting thing is that my second son, I have two sons, was born in 2012. And her second daughter, she has two daughters, was born, I think, in 2011. So it's interesting because it felt like we were still doing really good work until about 2011, 12, and our work quality dipped a lot for about 2 years. So when we look back at it, it was like 2012 to 2014, it was like we were in survival mode. Because I think once we both had young kids at home, that was the hardest. That was by far the hardest. Like it was insane. So I think the hardest years were 2012 to about 2014 when we both had like each of us had a 4-year-old and a newborn baby at home. That was crazy, crazy. Like, yeah, looking back at it, like we were barely surviving as a studio, I think, because of that. Yeah, yeah. It's just the commitment, the time, the lack of sleep. Like it's all like old memories for me now. But you come to work and you haven't slept, or you slept 3 hours, and you know that your partner is at home dealing with that craziness, and you get back home and it's all over again, and you're just exhausted, and then you're barely making it through meetings. And I don't know how we did it, but we did it. Yeah, we did it. And I think at the time we were 5 people. So I mean, we had amazing staff that I think carried the studio during those really hard years, and it was because of them that we were able to make it through, I think. So yeah, but it was insane. And I think it was 2014 that things started looking up to us, when our second kids were both a little older and we were a little more in control. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, I'm just observing friends of mine who have kids in that age too, like under 4, under 5, and just having a family is a huge undertaking. Taking care of kids, especially two kids, I think when you have a baby and like a toddler or a preschooler, that's maybe the toughest combo.
Yes, it is by far the toughest combo. When I see parents like that, I'm like, oh wow. I don't even want to look at them because I'm like, that is insane.
Yeah. Yeah, that's so much work. And then a business on top of that, a
Yeah.
business itself, and even one that's like, I imagine by the third or fourth year, you felt a little bit more comfortable in how Underline was doing, but it's still, I
Yeah.
mean, a business, even that's a decade or 20 years old, still feels, it's a lot of work to maintain. And, I imagine it kind of feels like, I hope you do feel more secure running Underline now, but, it's never perfectly secure.
No, it's never. No, it's never. Yeah, it's never perfectly secure. You don't know what's really going to happen. Like so. Yeah, it's very unpredictable. You're trying to. The difference when you have young kids like that is that you're physically exhausted. Now I have my kids are teenagers almost. One of them is a teenager, and that one's that. Now I'm psychologically exhausted, but somehow that's more manageable. It's the physical exhaustion that is just insane. You're just like you just cannot handle anymore, but you have to keep going. And on top of that, you're having to deal with all this work stuff.
Well, yeah, just the lack of sleep, that'll destroy you no matter what. And then yeah, you have to use all this brain power to do the design work, and then also to manage the clients and billing and payroll and all that kind of stuff.
It's tough, but somehow you find the energy, I guess, and you do it. Yes.
Yeah, you pushed through. You did it. Do you think having a business partner, having Claire, made a huge difference in that?
Huge difference. We both talk about it that we couldn't have done it alone. Not even now, like even now, like it's so nice to have a business partner. First of all, to share ideas, to bounce ideas from, to make sure you're doing the right work. But then for the day-to-day things too, like we divide the type of work we take on. Like one does more of the billing, one does more of the word entries, for example. Like we divide that so we're not doing all the grunt work ourselves, one of us. And then holidays. Then one of us can go on holidays and not worry about the studio at all. Like when I'm on holidays, I don't think about the studio at all. Claire takes over my accounts and she's in control. And I'm so happy she is because I'm fully off. And being able to do that is amazing, amazing.
Yeah, that's really, really key. Yeah, you need to be able to completely unplug from your work.
Yes, I can understand people who go on holidays and they're working still. And like, then you're not really on holidays. Like, yeah, it's a little bit of a break, but you really have to completely, like, they joke around here because when I come back from holidays, I don't even remember what jobs we're doing. I'm totally, totally gone. I'm like, okay, what was that again? So having a business partner gives you that. Like the people who don't have business partners, I think, yeah, they get burnt out because of that, because they can't really turn off, you know. We try to be as efficient as possible. And I think we learned that when we had the young kids, we couldn't work late anymore. We had to work 9 to 5. And so we both, I think, are naturally efficient. We are also very much alike in that sense. But when we had the young kids, we realized, okay, there's no way we can work late. We have to be efficient. So we found ways organically of how to make the workflows efficiently. And the most efficient way, I think we used to be more on both doing a lot of projects at the beginning, and then we realized we have to divide them. Uh, and we always show each other the work as it's being developed, but one of us leads an account, like a client more. So the client knows that they're speaking to one of us more for that job. And, for the presentation meeting, we're both there. So they know that the studio's there together. So the designers working on the project was kind of like there for the concept presentation. But after that is more one of us leading the project and being in charge of, especially the management of the client from the creative point of view, will be one of us. Because otherwise we would be working till 10 o'clock at night every night, which is not, it's not practical. Yeah.
And just for the parents listening, is there light at the end of the tunnel? Does it get easier having kids and running a business?
Oh yes, it gets a lot easier, way easier. And then you start missing them because they don't care about you anymore. So for those parents who have young kids, I have a 15-year-old son. He doesn't even know what I'm doing. And like, I have to keep asking him what he's doing because he couldn't care less about me anymore. So
Yeah.
so it gets a lot easier, a lot easier.
I know there will be people listening who are very like, oh, thank God.
Yeah. Yes, for sure, for sure. And even when they get a little older, like once they start school and they're away a lot and once they're sleeping normally, all of a sudden you realize, oh, okay, this is normal life again. Like, it's crazy. Yes.
So I wanted to ask you about these political posters that you've been doing for quite a long time. You've done some really beautiful kind of art posters about a variety of different sort of political conflicts around the world, but especially in your native El Salvador. This obviously seems like a cause very close to your heart, but would you tell us a little bit more about those projects?
Yes. So I talked about the 2012 to 2014 period where it was tough. And, when we were coming out of that period, I guess we were feeling very anxious creatively. Like we hadn't been doing a lot of interesting work. So in 2014, we did our first self-initiated project, like officially. And it wasn't a political project. It was a series of posters for the World Cup that year. But the whole studio got involved, and we had an exhibit of these posters at Bar Neon. And interestingly enough, someone that saw that had a big position at Google. I don't know what his title was at the time, but he loved the posters, and we got projects at Google because of that self-initiated project, which was an incredible story. We never did them thinking about it. We just wanted to re-energize ourselves and do something. Anyway, from that experience, I realized, oh my God, doing self-initiated projects is amazing. Like, it gives you energy. It's fun. You maybe get a client or not, but it just felt like it kind of gave meaning to the work we were doing. And it just grew spontaneously. In 2015, there was a big event in El Salvador. It was for this priest that had been murdered during the Civil War, Oscar Romero, and he was being beatified. But anyway, it was a huge event in the country, and I couldn't go back. I don't remember, young kids and all that. But I started doing a poster about it. Just, I don't know. And this was the days of Facebook before Instagram hit. And I shared that poster on Facebook, and it got a lot of really positive responses. So I thought, okay, that's interesting. So I started doing more posters about people who have been murdered during the Civil War that I admire. And it became our first newspaper, which collected. I thought it would be nice to make something that talked about these people. And I realized a lot of people were saying, this is a nice poster, but what is it about? Who is this person? So I wanted to give context to it and maybe, shed some light on what had happened there for people who didn't know. And so we did this newspaper, we printed it, and people liked it. But then we realized, okay, it became too self-serving, like it was just a design project. So we thought, okay, let's do it again, but now let's give it some meaning and raise money for an organization that's actually doing good work. So the second newspaper was about massacres in El Salvador. So again, things that were close to my heart, things that I wanted to speak about, but I didn't know how to speak about. And design became a medium to speak about them. So, like I had lived through the war, I had seen all this stuff. I felt like I was isolated in the design community. People didn't know about it. So it was a way for me to share my memories. And I thought it has to be beautifully designed so people care. If it's not, people won't pay attention. So for that second project, we did a Kickstarter campaign. It was a lot of work. It was insane. But we did raise, I think it was about $8,000 for this organization in El Salvador that reunites children that were stolen during the Civil War from their parents. And they were stolen by the military and sold for adoption to European families or North American families. And these kids had grown up, now adults, away from their families. They knew they weren't European or North American, but they didn't know where their families from. So this organization reunites them. They help these parents that have been looking for their missing kids for years, reunites them. So their work they do is beautiful. So this newspaper had to do with massacres and the disappearance of El Salvador and how they get reunited. So it was very touching. And one of the most wonderful experiences of it is working with writers and photographers and artists who donate their work for these projects. We contact them, we tell them what we're doing and say, would you let us print your poem, or would you let us print your excerpt from your book? And 90% of the time we've had amazing responses from people. And these are people that I admire the work they do, writers that I admire, photographers I admire. So that's been an amazing part of it too, meeting these people as I do these projects. So fast forward to now, we've been doing that. In 2019, we did the fourth one, which felt like it was a lot of work. We did it with Luis Mora, Colombian Canadian photographer, who does beautiful work of flowers. But COVID hit, and then my energy went really low, and I thought maybe that's it. We won't do any anymore. But the political situation in El Salvador is crazy right now. It's horrible. So I wanted to do something about it. So we just finished a fifth project. It took more than a year to do it again, because I feel like we're busy. My energy is less than it used to be. But it's a series of posters about dictators of the Americas. But we didn't want this to be too serious, so we wanted it to be funny. So it comes with a set of stickers, so you can put on the faces of these dictators to make them to look like clowns. And then we just talk about these dictators from the history of Latin America, from Argentina, Chile, El Salvador, and Nicaragua. And we had an amazing writer write the introduction. His name is Roberto Lobato. He's a Salvadorian American writer who wrote the intro for the project. So again, a fun project. We are launching that on February 29th at Issues. We're donating the money to an artist collective in El Salvador that we raised from the project. But I feel energized again from having done this project. There was a gap of almost, I guess, 4 years since the last one. And I feel like, we got back into it. And this is fun. This is interesting. This is great, working again with interesting poets and doing something like this.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen your previous projects and they're beautiful, and I think it's really interesting. You say these projects kind of have to be beautiful to get people's attention and to be successful communicative pieces. That beauty is really paramount to the mission of these works.
And we've met some incredible people because of it too. Like a couple of years ago, we did the branding and website for Javari Dance Theater. And that was one of my favorite projects we've done in the last few years. And she came specifically because of this project. We've had a lot of people come and say, we've seen those projects you do, and we want to work with you because of that. And that's wonderful, to have the experience to work with like-minded people who are doing something else out there. And that's really fun. Yes. Yeah. There's another client who's become a friend now. His name is Kevin Coleman. He's a professor of history at UFT in Latin American studies. I met him through these projects, and we're helping him do a documentary about Colombia and the massacre of the banana plantations there in the 1920s. And we've been working with him for like 4 years on different projects. Again, meeting people like that is wonderful, and doing projects with them is super interesting. Keeps you energized, keeps you really energized about doing work, right?
Totally, yeah. And I think the advantage of having these personal projects in your portfolio on, Underline's website versus the client work. Like the client work shows your design skill and what you can do for a client, depending on whatever they ask you. But these projects show not just your design ability, but your kind of your passions, your interests, the things that you care about, and the areas of the world where you would like to have an impact and help out with, the skills that you have. So it tells people a little bit more about just who you are kind of as people and again what you care about.
Yes, yes, and also it cues to some like-minded people. Okay, this is the studio we should be working with because they will understand what we're trying to say. Like with Kevin, he knows we care about what he's trying to say, but we also understand it better than a studio that didn't care about this stuff would, right? So
The work you put in your portfolio brings in more of the same work. It's a lot of work up front and you're not earning money off of it or what have you, but they can bring more of that work in once you have it online and it's done.
absolutely, yeah, absolutely, yeah, yeah, for sure.
Yeah, so I think it is important. Although, yeah, I also agree with the kind of conversation people are having today about avoiding burnout or healing from burnout and work-life balance and stuff. I don't think you should, kill yourself. But these projects, there's a reason we call them passion projects. Like you have a passion for the topic or whatever it is that you're doing, and it's important to you personally. And then you're using your design skills, your visual communication skills, to make an impact in whatever way that you can. And for myself, at least, when I'm designing something that I'm passionate about, it doesn't feel like labor.
And at the end, when we'll talk about ADCC soon, but when we brought Paula Schiff to do her talk here, she talked about these passion projects as also being a way to sharpen your skills, and it is true. They're fun to do. They're interesting, and you can experiment in ways that you can experiment sometimes with commercial clients, and then you find out different things that you can do as a designer, and you grow as a designer by doing them too. Like you really do. And I remember her talk. She showed an example of a project they'd done. I think it was for the TDC, and they had done some interesting experiments with typography that then they applied to a client project later on. So you do learn so much more by doing these projects too, where you have complete freedom. Like you do.
So I'm glad you mentioned the ADCC because I'm going to use that as my segue into the next part where we talk about kind of design community. And of course, you were part of you're still a member of the ADCC, but you were the president for a little while there. And you've been involved in a bunch of other organizations. You've spoken at so many different conferences over the years and everything. Why do you like to get involved in the design community here and even a little bit abroad? Why is that important to you? And why do you think other people should also be involved in organizations like the ADCC?
I think we need that as creative people to be involved with people that are like-minded. I mean, I'm not married to a designer. My wife is an occupational therapist. Her job is totally different, which is great. I don't want to only think about design. So it's great that she does something where she puts things in perspective, because she doesn't care about half the stuff I would care about. Or most of the stuff I would care about, which is wonderful. But at the same time, we do need like-minded people. We do need like-minded people where we can share our struggles, but also to get inspired from. When I joined the ADCC, first of all, I had always admired the ADCC, so I thought it was wonderful to be part of the board. But then even just going to the board meetings and being with other good designers was wonderful. But then when we started, I talked about Paula Scher, when we started these events of bringing designers from outside to do an exhibition and a talk, that was even more exciting for me, because talking to designers, the first one we brought was actually my friend Pablo from Mucho. But he talked about design in Barcelona, and that was cool. I thought that was exciting to get to talk about that. Then we brought Tony Brook from Spin, who had admired his work for years, so to be able to bring him over. And then Paula Scher, who we all know and we all admire. So to be able to bring people like that into the city, to hear them talk, to get the community together, that was the most fulfilling part for me of being at the ADCC, to bring some of that energy I had lived like in London about wanting to be surrounded by great designers, wanting to do good work, to talk about work. And that's what I liked about the ADCC, that we were not talking about billings and survival as designers. We were just talking about the quality of work. And that's the mandate they had. And that's why that's the club I wanted to be a part of. And to me, that was it. I wanted to be part of a group that cared about good work, and that's it. And to bring people who did that, and to do exhibits that was just about beautiful, great work. So I don't know. Everybody has different reasons to join organizations, communities, but to me, that was it. To me, that was That was the exciting part about it, to get that energy and that inspiration that I feel like I constantly need. And when I've been lucky enough to go to other countries for conferences or so on, that's what I get out of them. To meet great designers, to talk to them, to be surrounded by people who are full of energy because they're at a conference and they want to talk about it. I One of the most fun and exciting ones I did was in Mexico, in Querétaro. It was all Spanish-speaking designers that were speaking there. Some from Spain, some from Latin America. I met some wonderful designers there. Pablo Del Can, I'm trying to remember Alvaro Dominguez. A bunch of really cool illustrators and designers. But the energy was so high. We were all like full of energy, and seeing their work and hearing them talk about it. Like, I came back full of life, and yeah, that's just wonderful. And now that very like amazing that I become a member of AGI, the Alliance Graphique International. My friend Pablo is the one that really wanted me to be a member of that, and he's the one that pushed for my nomination to it. And he tells me, what you're gonna love about it, he goes, is the conference. So it's a yearly conference somewhere in the world, and he says all the really cool designers are there, and you come back full of energy. He goes, and that's what I'm looking forward to. To be surrounded by designers who have passion and desire to do good work. I think that's exciting. Yeah.
Oh yeah, that sounds great. I mean, I definitely know the feeling that you're talking about, going to even events here and the AGCC events as well, coming back home and feeling like, my cup has just been filled. I was just surrounded by all this passion and excitement and people who get it, who understand, who care about the exact same thing I do. And yeah, there is really no better feeling.
Yeah. I know exactly what you mean. That's, you come back feeling like, oh, and you want to do good work, right? Like, you want to do it. Yes, yeah. That's an amazing feeling. Yeah. And we need that. We need that. If you're stuck in your little home office, like my home, I'm at the studio right now, which is really nice because I have windows in front of me. But my home office is in the basement. It's really dark. I had a really nice office in the second floor, but when my teenage son wanted to get out of sharing the room with his brother, I had to give him that office. And then now I'm stuck in the basement, which has no windows. And it is like, if you're stuck in that little space and you're not connecting to people, it's impossible. It's impossible to want to continue to do good work. Then you just do the work to do it, but you don't want to continue work. You need to connect to people, and you need to connect to people in person. I mean, it's nice that we can do these things remotely like we're doing right now, but to really get the energy, you have to be in person. Like, it's such a difference. Like, it's such a difference. Like, last year I did a conference in Peru, and I met, Thierry from Base Design. I met Leo and Felipe from Puerto Roca. Just talking to them, and I just, like, seeing their work in person, it's a different thing. You can't compare it. So I'm so glad those organizations exist because they provide the platform for that, right?
Is that kind of feeling that inspires me to do the events that I do, because I feel that and I want to, bring that kind of magical energy into a room. And then I come up with the events I do, cool concepts, wash and serif, that kind of thing. Cause you need like a reason to gather. And, but once you get people in the room and they're excited about the thing they're there for, the talk, the art show, what have you. That's, yeah, I was looking for more excuses to kind of create that magic.
And you like, I told you when you asked me about the podcast, I'm like amazed at the energy you have, because it's a lot of work to do those things, and you do them really, really well. So yeah, like when I've been part of those events, they're amazing. And it's, yeah, you get that energy too. And it's so nice to have that. It's so nice to have it in the city. And it's so nice of you to do it, because we need it. We need it. And for anyone to do anything like that is wonderful. And like Nicola said in Issues Magazine Shop now, it's amazing to have those spaces and to have those things that connect us to people and that give us a physical reason to be together, whether it's an art show, a talk, a magazine shop, we need it. Yes.
And it's similar to like the passion projects that we were just talking about with these events and stuff. Yeah, there's work that goes into it. It's labor. There's some stress and anxieties around it and whatever. And I'm sure having been part of having done those talks yourself, but the passion kind of it balances it all out. It's so worth it in the end. I don't even really remember the stress. I mean, I remember the stress a little bit, but like the benefit of the event is so much more than the stress. Like it's almost like I can't resist.
Yes. You brought back memories of when I helped organize those events for the ADCC. there was a lot of resistance at first on the board because they're like, this is crazy. It's going to be too much work. But, I had the support of Claire and the rest of the studio to do it. And it was so stressful to get those. The first one was the worst because we didn't have a space. We were getting budget to bring Pablo to talk. Then he was shipping the work. We didn't even have a way to show the work. Lisa Greenberg let us use the restaurant she owned at the time to host the talk, but we had to get boards to put up the work. It was insane amount of work, and we never done it before. But at the end of it, we felt so satisfied with it. I mean, we felt so opening the box with the work they had sent from Barcelona. Just that alone was amazing. Like looking at all these pieces and looking at them in person and browsing through those books and packaging and stuff. And then having Pablo come and give the talk, and we were hooked after that. We couldn't stop. Yes, I know the feeling. Yes, yeah, it was fun. Yeah, it was a lot of fun. Yeah.
Yeah, I remember that first one. You reminded me that it was at a restaurant because I was thinking of the Great Hall because it's a lot of the subsequent talks have been at the Great Hall on Queen West. But yeah, you're right. That was at a restaurant, and it felt very. I almost like those kinds of venues more because it felt very intimate.
The second one was a little gallery in the distillery, and it was not until Paula shares that we found the Great Hall, I think, which was great. I mean, and because we needed a bigger venue for Paula share, we thought we needed to.
Oh, those tickets sold out in an instant.
Yeah, in an instant, but yeah, but it was, and it was funny because that was the last one I did, and I was sad, but at the same time I was happy because I think it would have burned me out to keep doing those. Yeah.
Fair enough. But now you can just attend and soak it all in. You don't have to worry about the stress of planning it.
Yes.
But I mean, speaking of the stress of organizing these events, I mean, you did choose to, and it's a great idea. I love it. But you did choose to have speakers come in from countries around the world. I mean, the premise of the talk series is it's Design Barcelona, Design New York, Design Switzerland, etc. Design Quebec, even. So you very much chose to have speakers who, I mean, all these names are pretty well known in the design community. So you're going to get an audience out, I think, no matter what, which is, as an event organizer, really nice to know that people are definitely going to come. But it's also so much more organization, coordination, and it sounds like you cover the flights for your guests and the hotels and all that kind of thing, versus having a local guest. And there are, of course, wonderful Toronto designers here. So why did you decide to bring in these people from around the world versus focusing on sort of homegrown designers?
The ADCC always brings international judges, right, to judge the work, to be impartial. So I think part of the idea came from that. But part of the idea comes also from the origins of Underline, admiring the work of that other people do, and not just Europe, but Mexico, Japan, other places. So trying to soak that energy that's in other places and trying to make sure we stand up to that energy in Toronto and live up to that ourselves too. There's nothing wrong with doing talks with local designers. I think it's wonderful too, but I think it's also exciting to see how other designers are working. I remember Pablo's talk. He talked about so much about the three of the design family in Barcelona, how they had all come from this design and how they were all kind of related in a way. It's just really interesting to see the different styles and methods of working and the different kind of philosophies that designers would have from city to city. So yeah, part of it was, that to, bringing that energy, hoping to bring that energy into the city. But the original thing was like, okay, if we're bringing judges, I proposed to the board, why don't we use one of those judges to the talk? And that was the original idea, but then logistically it didn't work at the time because it was more complicated to do that. So we had to separate it. But by then we had agreed that it would be design events of cities from different parts of the world.
So do you think it's really critical for any designer's career, but just their I don't know, almost artistic well-being to be involved in the community like this?
Yeah, I think so. Artistic well-being is a good way of putting it. I think it's for our artistic well-being to be involved with this. I can't imagine any other way of not being involved somehow. Yeah. Whether it's attending conferences or being part of a club or going to events of any sort,
Well, we talked about a lot of stuff that you find kind of inspiring and exhilarating and a lot of work. What's the future plans for Underline and for yourself?
Yeah, no, we get asked that a lot and we never have a good answer. Because if we give the honest answer that we're just trying to survive, it doesn't sound very inspiring or good. I mean, the answer is we're still passionate about the work that we do and we want to keep doing beautiful work and great work. I think that's the answer we have. We never have a business plan. We don't want to grow as a studio. We don't want to have a big agency. Once a few years ago, we grew to 11, and that Claire and I did not enjoy that because we were managing and not designing. So we know that we like keeping the studio small and doing fun, interesting work with good clients. That's what we want to keep doing. And for now, that's all we know, that we would like to keep doing that, keep doing interesting work as a small unit of studio. And hopefully we can keep doing that. That's about all the plans we have for the future. We've done this new newspaper. We're doing this launch. We're always thinking of what to do differently for the studio, update our website, maybe change it a little bit. How do we connect to people more? But no grand plans. I guess because we're so busy just the day-to-day that it's hard to make grand plans, So, yeah, but if we keep doing what we've been doing, we'll be very happy.
For anybody listening who is running their own studio or considering starting one, how many years do you think it took before you figured out kind of your optimal setup as for running a business?
Yeah, it's funny. When we first started, we ran into Bob Hamley at an event. He said, in 3 years, guys, in 3 years, you guys will be set. We're like, 3 years. We hit the 3 years, so it's still a mess and chaos. We're like, come on, what's going on? I guess it was 3 years in the 90s, and it wasn't 3 years now. I think it took us at least 5 to 7 years to feel settled, up to a point that we're like, okay, we're not going to go bankrupt. We're not going to crash. We're not going to disappear just like that. It took a while. And the process, we looked for a good accountant, which the first one, super nice guy, but he wasn't a great accountant. We looked for some business help, coaching, which in the end, the best thing that came out of that was that we met an amazing accountant who's been like the cornerstone of what the business side of the studio has been. Yeah, maybe even 8 to 10 years until we felt really settled. And like, we were like, okay, we're not making as much money as if we were in a big agency. We're not cashing in lots of money, but we're making a living and we're satisfied with the work we're doing. Yeah. And that's where we found that we were stable. But it took a while. And I do think that Bob is right. In the 90s, it probably took a lot less. There were bigger clients, bigger budgets. There were all those huge annual reports that we're doing. I remember Concrete, when I saw their portfolio early on, I think they had been in business 2-3 years and they were doing Nortel annual reports. I'm sure their budgets were huge. And so in 3 years, they were settled because the budgets were huge for those years. So hopefully people won't take us long. Hopefully people will be settled in less time. But for us, it took that long, and maybe because of the type of work we were doing. Maybe if we had been doing more corporate work early on, we would have been settled sooner.
Well, I'm glad for all the success that you guys have had. I definitely love watching from afar, watching the new work that you put out, and hearing these stories just makes it seem all that much more impressive, because it's certainly not something everybody can do.
Thank you. And I hope we don't run out of energy too soon.
Me too. Well, thanks so much for joining me, Fidel. It's been a great conversation, and thanks for giving me so much background into all of the things that you've done and the ways that you think. This is really interesting.
Thank you, Margot. Thank you for having me, and thank you and congratulations for doing this. I think it's wonderful.
Thank you so much. Bye.